What does $100,000 buy you in the NFL? Apparently, a very public apology and a quiet reassignment of shame. Lights, camera, fourth quarter, Cardinals up 21-6, a 72-yard sprint that should have been a dagger until the ball slips free because the runner celebrates too early. The stadium goes from delirium to stunned in a heartbeat. On the sideline, Jonathan Gannon erupts, chases down his running back, yells in his face, and makes contact. The club later fined him $100,000. The league said it will take no further action. What you saw on the broadcast was more than a coach losing his cool. It was a compressed story about leadership, accountability, and the razor-thin line between passion and poor judgment. A coach's instinct is to punish error. A coach's duty is to protect the player. When the punishment becomes public theater, the balance breaks. And the headlines stop asking about the blown call and start asking about the man in the headset. CBS Sports play-by-play. Emari Demercado bursts through the defense, looks home free, and in a split second lifts the ball in celebration before crossing the plane. Officials rule a touchback. Possession flips. The momentum does a 180. Tennessee, energized, stages a furious comeback and wins 22-21. The single miscue, a bonehead, human, devastating instant, becomes the fulcrum that tips a winnable game into a loss. Cameras don't blink. They catch Gannon losing his. CBS Sports, let's not pretend this is just a one-off discipline story. Teams are ecosystems. A coach's response to failure sets the emotional thermostat. When leaders publicly berate or physically confront players, the message is double. Mistakes are unacceptable, and I will single you out when you mess up. That can light a competitive fuse or create resentment that smolders across the locker room. The Cardinals chose to punish Gannon financially, a clear play to acknowledge wrongdoing without destabilizing the chain of command mid-season. Reuters' Demercado's personal stat line from that game is cruelly ironic. Big plays and big consequences. 81 rushing yards on 3 carries, including that dead ball 72-yard sprint that never counted. The box score reads like a Greek tragedy. Heroics erased, opportunities stolen by a lapse in awareness, and a young player left to shoulder both public humiliation and the private knowledge of what might have been. Yahoo Thethau. Gannon apologized publicly and privately, saying he let the moment get the better of him, a phrase that lands as both apology and confession. The team, the NFLPA, and the club hashed it over quickly. The league declared no further discipline. But money isn't the same as leadership repair. A fine acknowledges wrongdoing. Culture requires rebuilding. The optics, camera footage, fan chatter, social media clips, do the longer work of shaping how the coach is perceived. Yahoo Thethau. So what are the stakes beyond a headline and a bank withdrawal? First, trust. Players need to believe their coach will correct them in ways that help them get better, not humiliate them. Second, message discipline. If Gannon is the kind of leader who snaps publicly, opponents and media will use that moment to frame his temperament and, by extension, the team's composure under pressure. Third, job security. This is year 3 for Gannon. The Cardinals sit in a hole and can't afford narratives that erode confidence in a coach already under scrutiny. Reuters. Now the moral puzzle. Does a private dressing down work better than a public one? Sports psychology suggests the answer is yes. Constructive correction, specific, discreet, immediate, fixes behavior without humiliation. Public shaming tends to trigger fight-flight responses. Some players respond with renewed focus, others shut down, and some simply grow wary. The fine signals the franchise's preference, accountability for the coach's heat, and a desire to keep the locker room intact. Whether that restores trust depends on follow-through. Reuters' this moment also exposes the fragility of momentum in pro football. One spark, a celebration before the finish line, and an entire game can flip. Coaches are hired to manage those micro moments. When they don't, they get blamed. Gannon's reaction turned a human error into a larger storyline about temperament and leadership. For Demercado, it's a learning moment that will haunt him on tape and perhaps harden him as a player. For the Cardinals, it's an organizational stress test. Can they navigate public fallout and fix what actually lost the game? CBS Sports, here's the pragmatic playbook for the Cardinals now. 1. Repair the relationship between coach and player privately and publicly. Apologies matter less than changed behavior. 2. Reestablish cultural norms so future mistakes are corrected without spectacle. 3. Use this as a teaching film for the roster. Show what happens when focus slips and how small errors compound. Teams that learn fast survive longer. Teams that litigate their leaders on social media do not. Reuters. And for Gannon, the fine is expensive but survivable. The reputational hit is trickier. How he leads from here, measured tone, visible protective moments for his players, clearer on-field decision-making, will determine whether this is a costly lapse or a pivot point toward better leadership. The league's no further action buys him a chance at redemption. It doesn't erase the clip that'll loop on every highlight reel. NFL.com, final thought, football is a game of inches and impulses. Sometimes those impulses are brilliant, a split-second cut, a climactic dive. Other times they're catastrophic, a celebration before the plane, a coach's hand where it shouldn't be. The fine buys a headline and a corrective moment. What it can't buy is the instant replay loop in fans' heads or the private shame a player carries. If the Cardinals can turn this into a subtle leadership lesson, not a circus, they may yet salvage both season and sanity. If not, this clip will be the one people pull when they want to ask whether leadership on the sidelines is built on respect or fear. Who's right in the heat of that moment, the coach who explodes or the player who flubs? The answer is complicated, but here's the clean part. You never celebrate before the whistle. The rest is messy, and that's why sports are still worth watching. You ever watch a game sink in slow motion, one split second that rewrites everything? That happened on Sunday, and it finished on Tuesday with a $100,000 fine that says as much about emotion as it does about discipline. The league announced the Cardinals fined head coach Jonathan Gannon $100,000 for his sideline altercation with running back Emari Demercado. The NFL said it would take no further action after consulting with the players' union and the club. Reuters, here's the raw chain. Demercado rumbled on what looked like a 72-yard touchdown. Then, inches from glory, he fumbled before crossing the plane. The ball was effectively lost, and the swing changed the scoreboard and the narrative. Cameras captured Gannon storming onto the sideline, angrily confronting Demercado and making physical contact as the player walked away. Those images burned across feeds and set off an immediate reaction. The play helped fuel the Titans' comeback in a 22-21 Arizona loss. Reuters. If you want to understand why a coach gets fined six figures for this, you need to see three overlapping things at once: the mistake, the human reaction, and the public nature of modern sports. First, the mistake. Dropping the ball before the goal line is the kind of self-inflicted horror that costs games. It's a moment of stunned silence and instant what-if that every team fears. Second, the reaction. Gannon's visible fury is the kind of raw, unfiltered human response that used to live in locker rooms and quiet meetings. Now, with 24/7 cameras and social feeds, those private flashes become public lessons. Third, the league and the club have to manage optics, standards, and player safety. The fine is a blunt instrument meant to mark a line. Coaches can be furious, but they can't cross certain boundaries with players on the sideline. S.I. Gannon himself tried to walk both back and forward at once. He acknowledged the heat of the moment, apologized to Demercado and the team, and said the episode didn't reflect who he wants to be as a leader. "I woke up this morning and didn't feel great about it," he said, explaining that he'd addressed it in a team meeting and offered an apology. That public remorse matters. It's what keeps locker room discipline from tipping into something worse, but it doesn't erase the picture that went viral. San Mateo Daily Journal. What happens next matters for multiple reasons. For Demercado, an undrafted back on a hard early career learning curve, this is more than a one-play headline. He finished with 81 rushing yards on 3 carries in the game. But what will stick in the short term is how teammates, coaches, and fans react to his handling of the aftermath. In the long term, the real test is whether the team rallies around him and whether the staff turns this into a teaching moment rather than a public spectacle. San Mateo Daily Journal for Gannon, the fine is a public rebuke and a practical statement about accountability. He's in his 3rd season as Arizona's head coach, and the team now sits at 2-3 after 3 straight losses. This franchise is already under pressure to find stability and results. A coach getting fined for an on field confrontation is not just an interpersonal issue, it's a leadership story that will be folded into evaluations about culture, control, and the direction of the program. Reuters. From the league's point of view, the decision to levy a fine but take no further action is calculated. It punishes unacceptable behavior without escalating to suspensions or longer punishments that would further destabilize a team mid-season. The NFL has to balance enforcement with season flow. It also has to account for union input and precedent. Finding the coach and closing the file is a message to everyone. We saw it, we disapprove, now move forward. But don't expect